Premiere settings. So, what useful settings do we have? All Premiere settings are divided into two groups. Some settings relate to the settings of this particular project, and they are located in Project Settings. We consider them from the very beginning. The second ones are in the Edit section, Preferences. They are also in Preferences on Mac. So, what is useful here, and what should you pay attention to? Let's analyze the entire panel in order. Firstly, let's see what we have in the General tab. At Startup shows what we have opened at the beginning. We have a home page, or we can immediately set it to open the last project. You don't need to make extra clicks. You can make it open the last project that we worked on. Next, we can set the actions that occur with folders. By default, when we double-click, the folder will open in a new window. When you press Ctrl, it will open in the same tab. When you press Alt, it will be in a new tab. You can change these settings. Let's say that by default we want the folder to open in the same tab by double-clicking, or we want to open it in a new window by clicking Ctrl. So, it seems to me that it's even more logical and convenient. By double-clicking, projects open in a new tab. They open in a new window where we pressed Alt key. The same as with folders, because projects can also be nested in another project as links. Next, we have checkboxes. Show Event Indicator is the display of a red or yellow indicator with some text that is located in the corner. If we have this checkbox enabled, a pop-up window will appear on the site. If you disable it, it won't. Show tooltips are hints that appear when you hover your mouse over a particular tool icon. Show Workspace Reset Warning dialog on double-click is a setting that resets this panel to the initial stage when you double-click on it. And a new feature that has appeared is Enable Display Color Management, requires GPU acceleration. When we disable this feature, it will bring the color palette to match the selected color profile of your monitor or computer. If I disable it, the color will be changed a little. The next setting is Appearance. It's responsible for everything related to appearance. Let's say we can adjust the brightness. If someone doesn't like the dark interface of Premiere, then you can make it lighter. It completely loses its contrast. We can recall early versions of Premiere. It was light gray in color. Let's go back to dark one. There is a backlight, brightness and button selection. Let's say that this is the selection of a window, its outline. This makes it brighter and dimmer. Everyone can customize the way they like. This is among the parameters that are synced with the cloud. You can find various settings in the Audio tab. Auto-match time refers to matching. When we mix by sound, 5.1 mixdown type is responsible for how 5.1 sound is mixed. If we don't have speakers, then we can choose which channel we output. The front and rear speakers that we hear are output, but you can also output other speakers or zoom them up in a different way. For example, we leave only the front speakers, or the front with all the others. But this is important if you often work with 5.1 sound. Next, we have a large volume adjustment. This is a parameter that allows you to use the keyboard to raise the volume up or down with square brackets and edit the Shift key. And if we click up or down with square brackets, then we will have an increase or decrease of 1 dB. If we edit Shift, then we will have an increase or decrease of 6 dB. If this is too much or not enough, we can change this parameter. The Zoom multi-channel output to mono in source monitor checkbox is used in situations where we are working with multi-channel audio. When we have 5 mono tracks, they will be added together so that we can hear them. If we uncheck this box, it will only play the first track, and the others won't be played at all. Play audio while scrubbing is playing sound with the mouse. If we disable this checkbox, nothing will be played when we move in playhead. The next checkbox is maintain pitch while shuttling. When I play a video at double speed, it will retain the timbre. But if I uncheck this box, it will play as it should when the speed increases. Next, we have mute input while timeline recording. Timeline recording is a recording from a microphone. We can plug in microphone and record right here. This is done with the track mixer. For example, we include recording on track number 2. But for this you need to activate some microphone here. So we go to the preferences settings and choose audio hardware. We need to select a microphone in the default input. I won't do that because my microphone is busy recording my voice right now. Therefore, we can spell out the text directly on the track. In order for the track to read normally, we disable the playback of all other sounds. Ensure silence. There will be silence, so that the sound from the speakers doesn't get to the microphone. But if we put on the headphones, then we can leave everything. Automatic audio waveform generation is a very important thing. By default, it's always enabled. When we import a music asset or a video and open the file, a sound wave will begin to appear. And when we import a lot of large media sources, we may have a problem that the program will take too long to draw sound waves. We don't need it. It's better that it will load up. The problem is that the audio won't be played until the sound is drawn. Sometimes it's useful to disable this drawing in order not to slow down the work and immediately start the editing. For example, when you finish a project for someone, if we disable the checkbox, the automatic drawing will be turned off. It will be drawn as you play it. Next, we have the automation keyframe optimization. By default, they are set to linear. You can disable this checkbox, then they will be with Bezier. Then we have a render edit in Audition files too. When we send some files from timeline to Audition, then by default it will save it to the media source. But you can choose some other folder if you really need it. The next step is audio hardware. Here we set the place where it takes the sound and where it sends the sound. If you work with speakers and need to switch to headphones or vice versa, then you won't need to pull out the plug so that the computer turns off the headphones. You can switch this setting here to default output or, for example, connect Bluetooth headphones. It should be noted here that Premiere has its own output to some audio channel that is not connected to the other system. By default, the system can output you to headphones and Premiere can output you to speakers. Here you can configure it so that it will be output to different channels depending on your need. Next, let's consider the autosave tab. By default, automatic project saving is always enabled, and it's better to change the save interval to a smaller one, for example from 15 to 7 minutes, and the maximum of project versions from 10,000 to several million. Also, there is an additional feature that allows you to save the project directly to the cloud. It saves backup project to the Creative Cloud. But since I already work via cloud, only via Google, and all my projects and autosaves are stored in Google, therefore this function is irrelevant to me. But in general, if you are working on a local disk, it will be very useful if the copies are immediately thrown back to the cloud. And the new feature that appeared recently is autosave also saves the current project. It makes the same autosaves, but gives them numbering, not 1, 2, 3, etc., but with a date and time. That is very convenient when you need to find any autosave for a specific period of time. Such a tab as Capture is responsible for everything related to capturing from a film media that we can already forget about, but there is such a thing. There are tools for capturing it. There is a whole separate panel for capturing film media, but there is no particular use for this. So we move on. Then we have the Collaboration tab. Here is everything related to team projects in Premiere. If you don't have a corporate license for 50 users and you don't belong to any company, then all the settings won't be useful to you. But in general, the toolkit is very good. Plus, here is such a thing as project locking. The Enable Project Locking feature is worth mentioning. For example, you work for a company or have a separate license, which in principle doesn't matter. Your project is stored somewhere on a network server that can be accessed from another computer. So, when you set project locking and another person tries to open it, he'll get a warning. When you have this project open, no one else can access it and overwrite it. He can only open it and create a new copy. This is very important when you work in such companies, so there is no accident. For example, you were working on a project all day and someone opened your project, then closed it and saved the changes after you. So your project would remain at the stage when another person opened it. All your work may disappear. Therefore, when you work in a company, it will be better to check the box, so that no one can overwrite your project. I'm going to talk about the Control Surface tab. Here we can connect different control surfaces. There are many different devices that speed up the process of editing, color correction, sound mixing, etc. That's all relevant here. This can be a MIDI controller that allow you to control the volume of the channels. This can be a panel for color correction, or separate device that allow you to display individual parameters for the timeline to more convenient devices, etc. All this is connected here with the control surface. Device control refers to capture devices. Here we select and configure them. Graphics can also be skipped. Labels contains the number of colors that we can use to color our clips. And here we assign default color values for different tasks. For example, by default the sequence is green, but we can make it with a mango color. Or we can change Adobe Dynamic Link from rose to yellow. We can customize the color according to our preferences. Also we can create a color of our own, assign it its own action and its own name. The next important tab is Media. Here we have the settings or the time base, the time code. By default the time code is taken from a media source, but you can choose to start the time code with 0 each time. There is also a frame count. By default it starts at 0, but some tasks may require it to start with 1. Let's say the frame counter from the first second sounds like second first, 0 frame, second first, first frame, second first, second frame, etc. So there won't be a 0 frame, but will be 1.1. There is default media scaling. By default there is none value, and this is good. We can change this parameter, for example, to scale to frame size. It will automatically adjust each video that we uploaded to the timeline, wherever is larger or smaller than the timeline, to the size of a window. It will automatically adjust each video that we uploaded to the timeline to the size of a window. Write XMP ID to files on import is a function that creates its own XMP ID for each file that will contain the metadata of this clip. The metadata includes markers related to the clip, comments that we added there, etc. It will append this data for those videos that don't have their own XMP file. And the next thing, write clip markers to XMP. It allows you to choose where to record information about the markers. If it's active, it will insert markers into the clip metadata by default. If it's disabled, the information about the markers will be stored in the sequence. Enable clip and XMP metadata linking is responsible for linking both of them. Include captions on import allows you to edit subtitles. If they are linked to this video, they will be imported along with it. There is the Enable Proxies function. This is what we disabled with a checkbox on the program window. It is synchronized with the toggle proxies icon. We have allowed duplicate media during project import. For example, we import a sequence from another project or another project with the same settings to our project. If you check this box, it will import these media sources twice. They will lie twice in the project. If the checkbox is disabled, then it will import only what it lacks. For example, it will import a sequence with a new editing, and the sources themselves won't be imported again. This is convenient. Next, it creates folder for imported project. When we import an entire project, it will create a separate folder for it. Automatically hide depend clips is a very good thing. When we import our current project, we import the sequence, and in doing so, it imports all the sources that are not in our project. but that are associated with this imported sequence. This function throws them at the root. If we enable this checkbox, it will throw them there, but it will put them with a hide status. When we don't want to delete some clips from the project panel, but we don't know where to put them, we can just hide them. To do this, we right-click and select Hide. They are in our project, in the project panel, but they are not displayed. If we need to see them, then we right-click and select View Hidden. All media sources that are imported with a new sequence will be imported with this hidden icon. We won't see them if we don't want, so this is a good thing. We can enable accelerated H.264 decoding. The DDO card will be used to decode the H.264 codec that speeds up the operation. And finally, we can see the automatically refresh growing files. For example, we have a clip in the project that is simultaneously filled in from the film, but it's readable. Let's say the MOV container allows this, and we play it, but it's lengthened in our project. Therefore, here it will be updated every 60 seconds. The next step is media cache. This is a very important thing to know about. By default, the media cache is always stored on the C drive in the app data, local and roaming folders. They start accumulating in these folders. If you don't remove them from there and you have a solid state C drive, then your C drive will get clogged very quickly. So we want to understand what the reason is, and the reason lies in the media cache. So the first thing to do after installing Premiere is to change the folder where the cache will be stored, because everything that is linked to this installation belongs to the cache. For example, there is generating a sound wave, so that we can always see it on the timeline panel. It is generated once and saved to the hard disk. There are editing systems that generate sound waves in real time, but it takes time. And when you have a clocked timeline, everything will slow down wildly. Premiere works differently. It immediately draws them once and stores them on disk. So, you need to choose a place where it will store everything. For example, it makes small previews of each 100th frame in the sequence, in order for you to have such icons that are quickly updated. These also have to be stored somewhere. You need to choose the largest disk in order to avoid this. Also, it has such a great feature as automatic cache cleaning. It deletes the cache of media sources that we have not used for more than 90 days, or when they take up more than some size on the disk. There are options like Do Not Delete Cache Files Automatically, Automatically Delete Cache Files older than 90 days, or Automatically Delete Oldest Cache Files when cache exceeds 22 GB. Personally, I prefer the second option. In the following memory layout, we can choose how we distribute RAM across all Adobe applications. For example, if you are simultaneously work in Premiere and After Effects, they will not take up more than 11 GB of RAM. I have 16 GB of installed RAM, 5 GB of RAM reserved for other applications. If you want, you can reduce the RAM for the Windows system to 3 GB. Then you will have 13 GB available for applications, but in this case, there is a possibility that it will overload so much that it will slow down the system and accordingly the work process. There is also optimized rendering for performance memory. It optimizes rendering for RAM or for CPU usage. There is no big difference here. You can leave the default performance. The next step we have is playback. Here we set pre-roll, post-roll, step forward or back, and step forward or back many with shift. Now it's set to 5 frames, but you can choose a different value, for example 25 frames. Then it will move for a second forward, for a second back. What is a pre-roll and post-roll? When you have a splice and play it in the trimming mode, the pre-roll is how much the timeline moves back, and the post-roll is how much it goes forward. It goes forward for 3 seconds, goes back for 2 seconds, and plays it again. Or when we press Shift plus K, it will do the same thing. Enable Mercury Transmit is the output to to an external device. We can output both video and audio. Pause media encoder. When and during playback can be turned on or off. I have turned it on. When we render something in Premiere, in parallel with working in media encoder, the media encoder will be paused, so that the timeline will play normally. As soon as we move away from the computer, it starts rendering in the background. This is how this checkbox works. Adobe DV is a video device on which we can output an additional image. If I had an additional monitor, it would be indicated here that it could display an image from the source and program windows. Next, we have the Sync Settings tab that is responsible for what we sync to the cloud. We select the timeline settings in the Timeline tab. By default, video transition default duration is set to 25 frames. When we press Ctrl+D, we will create a transition to a video with a duration of 25 frames. The same is for audio. We create a 25 frame transition on the audio by pressing Ctrl+Shift+D, but I set it to 10 frames. We can set all the transitions both in frames and in seconds, depending on the material we are working with. Frames are always 25 FPS, and it doesn't matter if your video is 30 FPS or 25 FPS. Still image default duration is the length for static images. By default it's set to 5 seconds. If we imported a picture or a caption, it would last 5 seconds. There is timeline playback auto-scrolling. When we have a long timeline played, the playhead will be played to the end and will be thrown further. Then it will start moving again. We can say that this is a page scroll, and if we choose no scroll, then the playhead will go off the screen and nothing will change. It will move somewhere off the screen. There is a smooth scroll option that looks like this. Playhead remains in place and the timeline is gradually scrolled to the side. Timeline mouse scrolling shows how we scroll through the timeline using the mouse wheel. By default it's scrolled horizontally, but if I need to run through a vertical timeline, I can put vertical. At the same time, the Mac mouse, where the wheel turns in different directions, just works like that. These two settings work simultaneously. Next, let's consider default audio tracks. When we import some audio to Premiere, it will import mono media as mono, stereo media as stereo, etc. by default. It takes the form of the imported file itself, but you can change the settings. Let's say if we split a stereo pair into two mono channels. We can make stereo import as mono. Someone needs it because it may be useful for some tasks. There is set focus on the timeline when performing insert override edits. When this checkbox is disabled, then insert and override selections will remain in the source window. If we enable the checkbox, the selection will move to the timeline. The blue line indicates that the timeline is active. Next, we have Snap Playhead in timeline when Snap is enabled. When this feature is enabled, the playhead will be glued to the splices. When it's disabled, it will pass through them without clinging in any way. At playback end, return to beginning when restarting playback is a good thing, that is better disable. When you play a piece or entire timeline, it will reach the end and start over. When you edit something at the end, you will move directly to the beginning. If you are editing an hour-long program, then such jumps will be inconvenient. Therefore, it's better to disable it. Next, it displays out-of-sync indication for unlinked clips. Let's check the box. The out-of-sync indicator appears, but my clip is linked, so everything is logical. If we link the clip, it will still show the out-of-sync indicator. If we disable the checkbox, it will no longer be there. If we have already linked, we won't care if the clips are synced or not. Check the box or not. It all depends on you and your tasks. There is Play Work area after rendering previews. It's also advisable to disable it. Let's say you calculated the timeline by clicking render into out. Here it will calculate to the end, and after that it will start playing the video from the beginning. What are you doing during the render? Personally, I get away from the computer and drink a cup of tea. And then I'm drinking tea and I hear the project I'm working on playing on my computer. On the one hand, this signals that the render is finished and you can continue working. But on the other hand, sometimes it's very loud and unexpected. Therefore, it's better disable this function. Render audio when rendering video is a very useful thing that is better left enabled. When you set it to render, the video is rendered and video previews appeared, but audio previews weren't rendered. And when you send your video to the final export, you think that the rendering will start immediately, because the video is calculated, but no, it starts rendering all audio previews. Therefore, it's better to check the box so that the rendering process goes simultaneously. Next, we had the show clip mismatch warning dialog. This is a situation when you threw the first video on an empty sequence that differs in size from the sequence. A warning window appears. You have a sequence diverging in the video. Do you want to feed the video to the sequence, or the sequence to the video? This is the mismatch warning dialog. If you disable it, this window will no longer appear. Match frame setting point is a feature that appeared recently. If I use match frame on a video, it will open that video in the source window on the same frame and will put markers in and out of the same clip. And if we enable the checkbox, then match frame will do the following. Firstly, we press F on the highlighted video, and then it opens the same frame as here, but puts the markers in at this point without markers out. Maybe this is useful for some tasks, but I personally need a clip highlighted with markers in and out for most tasks. The last thing left to consider is trim. We were talking about the trimming window. It looks like this, and here we can crop with one frame, with 5 frames. If we press Ctrl plus left and right arrows, the splice will move left or right. If we press Ctrl plus Shift plus left or right arrows, the splice will move left or right by 5 frames. This is what we set in the settings. Large trim offset is how we move with Shift. Finally, allow selection tool to choose row and ripple trims without modifier key is what concerns the modifier key. The Ctrl key turns a normal selection tool into a ripple and row, and if we enable this checkbox, it will be the opposite. By default, we will have ripple and row, and with the Ctrl key pressed, there will be a usual red bracket. These are the most important functions in preferences that I wanted to tell you about. So, if you need any settings, you should look here.